I'm Gregg Anderson. I'm the Mobile Business Development Manager for Psion Motorola Solutions. Part of my role is to evaluate technology trends, and particularly with mobility in the mobility market, and determine how those trends are affecting organizations, and make recommendations and help customers implement those some of those trends. So we're going to talk about, as Woody indicated, consumerization, really what that definition is and what those trends will represent. Specifically, consumerization, I like to call it, is often referred to as BYOD. So we'll talk about BYOD and what that specific acronym means and how to manage that in your enterprise. And then we'll look at some specific mobile solution considerations as it relates to BYOD, and specifically we'll talk about the device side portion of that. Obviously there's some other components of that we'll discuss, but we don't have that much time today, so we want to make sure we are very topical and on point. Talk about some real-world examples. I'll share with you some custom interactions that I've had, and some of the solutions that we've deployed, and some of the steps and processes those folks have gone through to get to their final solution. Of course, we'll take your questions at the end. So let's get right to it. We'll talk about the trends and definitions in the consumerization. Again, BYOD. It's a bring your own device to the enterprise. This has been an increasing effect in the enterprise, folks bringing in their own smartphones for a whole bunch of reasons. They want to use it to make themselves more productive. It's a tool that they feel they can stay more connected to their job and stay more effective in that job. And it's that employee bringing in, whether it's a smartphone, a BlackBerry, I mean, you name it. You guys have seen them probably in your business as well. And these have been great tools, right? They're very functional. iOS, Android, terrific capabilities on these devices, and so folks use them, and they provide some value in the enterprise. Now, from an IT perspective, a lot of folks say, well, maybe this is a way to improve our cost in the enterprise, make things more efficient, and it can be, but again, as we'll see, it's all about managing your program in the correct way. So just a little data on the market. This is some data that was compiled, probably it's about the middle of last year, I think was the most recent survey I was able to get. And this really shows how this BYOD concept has grown in the enterprise. This is a survey of about 300 or so companies, and as you can see, over 2/3 of them are using some type of BYOD in the enterprise. Obviously, these are primarily smartphones, but again, the trend is pretty broad-based. Certainly not to be outdone, tablets have carved out sort of their own niche in that space. Certainly with the with the executive suite, those guys are wanting to bring those types of devices into the enterprise as well. So again, just creates a separate additional device segment within that space. Not to be outdone, I wanted to throw this slide in certainly to show that the lion's share of those tablets, of course, are going to be iPads. Certainly, probably no surprise there. What are the applications that folks are using? Primarily, these are going to be your email, your calendar, your day planner capabilities, personal productivity applications, personal information management, that sort of thing. That's obviously the lion's share of those applications, and you can see those applications, those other applications are used much less than your personal productivity ones. The two on the end of the graph, field service and sales applications, those are sort of what I would call mission critical type applications for certain businesses. We'll talk a little bit more about those and some of the challenges with BYOD when you've got these mission critical type solutions that you want to deploy. So again, just to summarize sort of the trend part of this, this is some data again from Forrester from last year, and certainly this is not a trend that's going away by any means. It's certainly increasing. I know with a lot of customers I work with, they're dealing with how to manage this whole effort, how to manage this whole trend. The comment here that Forrester makes, by 2016, you're going to see 200 million employees using smartphones. So that is not an insignificant number, and certainly creates perhaps some challenges for IT folks. And I guess the other comment I'd make about this in terms of the trend is, early on when folks are bringing these devices into the enterprise, it was more about, well, I've already got a smartphone, or I know how to use this device, and I'm going to connect my email to it. And that was, that part of it was easy. But now we're seeing enterprises having everybody bring in their phone or other type of device. And so that's creating a kind of situation where companies need to look at, rather than just using it as just a personal productivity tool, they can leverage these things to do a bunch of different applications. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. So again, BYOD management strategies. What are we going to do to manage all these devices in the enterprise? In terms of managing the framework, customers I've spoken to and projects I've worked on where they're wanting to deploy a lot of these, one of the biggest challenges I see is that there's not sort of an effort to really define what this policy is going to be. And I encourage folks to really look at doing the front-end analysis and defining what your program is going to be. And again, that's something you're going to have to do in your own business, in your own company, to figure out how are we going to manage these? How are we going to give data to folks? And I'm not going to define specific policies today, or at least a framework, because that's obviously something you guys need to do in the context of your business. But I'm going to touch on a few things that in things that I've seen recur, 4 or 5 things that I think is probably a good place to start. And again, you can go out after we're done with this webinar. I'd encourage you to go out, search on BYOD framework. There's all kinds of different ways that you might want to do this. Very granular level of management, but obviously we're going to be a little more topical today, and but I want to talk about a few things again that I've seen that work. But at the end of the day, it's all about what works for your business. So again, these are what I think are some of the most important first steps to take when it comes to managing a consumerization effort within your company. So first is clearly establish the corporate use policy. Make sure your employees know what they can bring in, what they can do with that device, what kind of data can be in that device, and that sort of thing. Ensure the mobile device and data security. This is a really huge issue now for companies, because workers might get access to customer databases, or even emails that might be corporate sensitive type information that perhaps in the wrong hands might create some liability for your company, create some personal liability for executives. So again, data security, what data is on that device, and then for the mobile device itself, what can we do to ensure that that device, if it gets lost or stolen, what can we do to make sure that we can protect that data? Next is managing and enforcing those systems' rights. Kind of goes along with mobile device and data security. As an IT person kind of managing this whole, orchestrating this whole effort, you really have to be clear in what users have access to what data. Now you could manage that, and I've helped customers define matrices where data access, system access rather, is a function of organization, maybe job function. Again, it just depends on how you want to deploy that and what access rights you want to grant those folks. Continually manage your deployment with the appropriate tools and technology. Generally stated, obviously this is not, this is a process that you have to go back and revisit all the time. You have to be diligent about managing your deployment. And when I'm talking about tools and technology, really you're going to have to look at some type of device management tool, And I don't care what it is. I'm not going to get into specifics on those right here, but there's a whole host of tools out there, whether they're cloud-based solutions, enterprise-based solutions, that'll help you manage these devices in the enterprise. So it's a key component, and again, it gets back to your policy definitions of how to manage BYOD in the enterprise. Obviously, there's going to probably be some costs involved to you to get that appropriate tool, training, making sure you've got enough people on staff to manage those components. And then lastly, evaluating a BYOD program as it relates to other corporate mobility projects. So as I mentioned at the outset, how does this type of BYOD program affect other mobile stuff you might want to do? Let's say you've got a mission-critical application. We talked about field service and field sales earlier, and you'd like those guys to be more productive, collect better sales data, have better customer data. Can we integrate BYOD, or is that not a good thing to do? So we'll touch on that. We'll touch on that briefly. So let's talk about, I'm going to combine this a little bit for the sake of time, but just from a mobile solution perspective and in other applications. So we're going to look at, what are some considerations for other mobile applications, and we'll look at some examples and some effort that I think it's worth doing on your part to really define the correct solution for your business. So BYOD, kind of changing gears a little bit, but again, this is a BYOD program as it relates to other mobility initiatives. And so, obviously an easy place to start when you're looking at other mobile apps is, what device should I choose? Should I go ahead and use, what our folks in the field sales group already has? And whether that's an iPhone or something else, will these consumer products really meet the need of the enterprise, or do you need to look at something else, something like a dedicated piece of hardware, whether it's this is a Psion product, or whether it's I don't care, pick your other dedicated product. This is the type of exercise you need to go through. We'll talk about this in a little more detail now. So this is a diagram I developed to help folks understand the important interactions between the three elements of what are really going to be looked at in terms of a mobile application. And again, this is not getting Outlook to your phone. This is mission critical application, whether it's a delivery application, field service, work orders. Pick your business unit. These are the three elements that are going to apply to that particular application. And again, this is just sort of a very simple approach, but I use this to help customers do some discovery about their project, because more often than not, I come into these situations and I'm brought in by the sales guys to help architect, what the business problem is, and more often than not, folks are looking at it sort of with a myopic view, and they're not stepping back and considering all the elements of what their mission-critical solution needs to be. So, if you've got end device, whatever that might be, we'll talk about that here briefly. Some connectivity element, whether it's WLAN, WLAN, batch, I don't care what it is. Application software, whether it's whether, again, a standalone batch application, an interactive, ERP type solution, what kind of thing do we have to have that run on our device? And really, at the end of the day, when you have this discussion with folks, it really starts to bring out the dependencies here between the device, the connectivity element, and the application software, that for each of these components have to be deployed correctly and have to be sort of the right tool for the job in order for your mobile application, obviously, to be successful. But when you start looking at it in terms of the simplistic diagram, you can get into some fairly low-level detail. For example, when you look at we've got a specific device that we want to deploy, or let's say you said, well, we'll just use a smartphone. Does that smartphone support the type of connectivity we need? Does it support, let's say, LTE 4G WLAN connectivity? Does it? Can we do a cradle sync batch activity? with our application and our device. Obviously, is that device, is OS going to support that software? How much memory is required? From a connectivity perspective in the application, what's our transactional footprint? Is it going to be too big or too small? So again, there's a fair amount of detail that can come out of this sort of simplistic diagram that, if you haven't thought about, can help you to determine what your application needs. And really, at the end of the day, if you read the right side of this, you've got to define the business problem requirements in order to know what you need to select. So really, that's a tool that I've had a lot of success with, and drives the requirements piece. We're going to talk a little bit more about the requirements here, just because more often than not, I've seen many of these mobile applications that have a BYOD program and they want to deploy a mission-critical application, but they really haven't assessed what the business problem requirements are for that mission-critical application. So let's look here for a minute. This is what I would consider a real-world kind of workflow of many customers I've worked with that are in the delivery space, less than truckload environment. And this would be sort of a typical non-digitized workflow for them in terms of how they do their job. Loading boxes, building trucks. You've got paper invoices, bills of lading. You've got guys driving around just based on their day, or just depending on how they might want to do their route. Obviously, they're delivering things. Customers are signing paper. And then we're back to the end of the day. So, in terms of this workflow, again, very typical kind of process. But this is sort of what you have to do to start looking at defining what the business problem is and what the requirements are for solving that business problem. Because obviously, if you want to, let's say, define the business problem as, let's improve productivity with the worker, let's improve our route delivery and gas cost with our trucks, vis-a-vis some type of routing management solution. Let's decrease our day sales outstanding with digitizing our invoices, getting those out on that day rather than waiting 30, 60 days for that invoicing to come. So there's a number of business problems that are associated with this kind of simplified workflow where a mission-critical mobile application can be put in. But again, I'll get back to defining that business problem and what those requirements might be. So I get a lot of questions. So what are those requirements, and what do you need to look at? And at the end of the day, it seems pretty simple, and it is, frankly. But again, using our framework, our solutions framework, to kind of help drive that discussion, I'm amazed at the number of customers that I've worked with that don't start here. And I understand that they want to deploy something quickly and get it out, but they don't take the time up front to really do what I would consider the homework to make it effective. So let's look at some examples. And these are some basic kind of discovery questions that again, using our framework diagram, that can drive some of this discussion of really what we need for mission-critical apps. So we're going to apply this to our example of a delivery environment. And the business problem is, okay, we're looking at this just from a device side, because when you look at the diagram, there's a whole bunch of requirements elements for each of those. But for the sake of time today, and again, to stay focused on what we're presenting here today, is we'll just touch on the device elements of this as it relates back to our diagram. So again, from a delivery business context, the customer says we're going to need a device that can withstand extremes of temperature, moisture, drops, that sort of thing. Well, in a BYOD context, here's what we've got. We've got an iPhone. Okay, let's put an OtterBox on it. Well, it's got no ingress protection. It's going to get wet if it's raining. It's got no drop spec, of course, so we're probably going to break it, even though the OtterBox might save it. Maybe not. No screen protection. So again, this is sort of a pro-con kind of thing, as compared to, again, I'm not promoting a specific piece of hardware here. This is just an example to show you a comparison between a kind of a dedicated enterprise unit and a BYOD unit that might be in your enterprise. So again, these types of devices have known IP ratings. They're protected against moisture and dust. Obviously, they'll have drop spec ratings. There's no additional cost for that. Obviously, that's included with the device. Oftentimes, when you do your total cost of ownership, and we'll talk about that shortly, your total cost of ownership analysis can be much more favorable than a BYOD type device. So another, again, very basic requirement, but this is something that you've got to ask yourself, or you've got to ask your customer, what do you need in terms of battery life? So obviously they're going to need long battery life in the field. There may or may not be a way to charge your device in the field. One of the challenges with BYOD and a consumer device, batteries are typically not field replaceable. In many cases, I don't know those of you who have a 4G LTE phone, but battery life is really bad in a lot of these LTE phones, primarily because these phones have two WN radios in them. You've got an LTE radio to support data, and then you've got another device, another radio that that supports the voice element. So those two radios running concurrently really can draw down your battery quickly. And of course, there's no high capacity battery option for those devices. And then, comparing to an enterprise device, high capacity batteries, long replaceable, many charging accessories depending on the type of device you were looking at. Again, the third type of requirement, we'd like to do data collection, do barcode scanning. This is a great requirement, something that a delivery application would want to use. So let's look at a BYOD device. I've talked to lots of customers that want to use a phone like this for doing data collection and barcode scanning. They tell me, oh yeah, it's fast enough. And CCD cameras are getting better, certainly on phones. I won't take issue with that. But for using a phone CCD to do dedicated data collection is just slow. I mean, it is very, very cumbersome. Your end users won't like it at all. It'll slow their workflow down quite a bit. It won't handle all types of symbologies. So if you're doing, let's say in the case again of a delivery outfit, they're doing a 3PL or they're doing contract delivery for a company like Staples, let's say, there are multiple different kinds of barcode symbologies. So again, something that the phone and the BYOD context doesn't handle real well. But again, this is a requirements definition piece. You've got to do this exercise to figure out what's the right tool for the job. Obviously, a device with a dedicated imager scanner is going to be much faster, decode multiple types of application or barcode symbology, and it's easy to use. And then, TCO, obviously you can't look at any kind of mission critical application, mobile application, without looking at obviously the cost of it. When you look at a BYOD environment, the employees bringing that device in, so there's really no cost associated with that device for you. But there's these other things we've already talked about in terms of durability, flexibility in your deployment, accessories depending on the device, residual value. I don't know when the last time anybody has tried to resell a phone or get some money for a phone that's a few years old. There's not a lot of residual value in these consumer devices. Whereas a dedicated enterprise device, obviously the cost of entry is going to be higher, but your longer-term TCO will typically be much better, and of course will have residual value. So in many cases you can capitalize that if you decide to make an upgrade, make a device change. There's some value there for you in the end. So I've covered a lot here, from BYOD and things to think about in terms of managing that deployment to doing other mobile applications within the context of your BYOD application. So I just wanted to just kind of review some of those things and touch on what I would consider to be really kind of best practice deployment activities as it relates to a mission critical application. And this is really beyond the BYOD context. This has to do with the stuff we've just covered in terms of requirements. But I hate to beat a dead horse, but gosh, I just so many times I see these projects get off to a poor start. because no one's done the upfront process analysis piece to figure out what's the business problem and what do we really need. So let's define the requirements and let's adhere to them. It's one thing to do the requirements piece. It's another thing to have all of a sudden requirements start piling on top of one another, and that's almost as bad as having no requirements as well. So again, it requires some strong project management methodologies, as well as making sure you've defined the project properly. Software compatibility, ease of use, integrations into the business. Mobile projects overall can be fairly disruptive to the enterprise, whether it's whether you're interfacing to an ERP system or I don't know, pick your back-end enterprise. Depending on how it's implemented, can really be disruptive. So, depending on the software you pick, can make or break how effective you are on making sure your deployment is going to work. So, you have to look at the compatibility piece of it. Provide the necessary internal resources or funds for support services when the project is deployed. Depending on the vertical that you're working with, or even in your own business, if you want to deploy a mission-critical application, make sure you are thinking ahead to when the thing is rolled out on who's going to support it. Too often I see, again, I'll get back to the delivery company example. Too often I'll see folks that are tagged to manage the project after it's been deployed, and either they have no experience doing that sort of thing, or they have that plus their other job, and so it can create some issues with having ongoing success of the project. And so again, make sure that even if you have to hire somebody, hire a consultant, whatever that might be, you need someone dedicated to manage that. Again, this gets back to our conversation about managing the BYOD element of this as well. Make sure you have the resources on staff that can support it. Build support internally. Champion the end user. I have seen so many deployments where the end user is not consulted, and it amazes me because the business side is looking at, okay, we're going to deploy the solution, make it very productive, make our guys supermen out in the field, yet they're making decisions on device and applications and workflow without ever consulting the end user, or if they are consulted at a very minimal level. So I've always found that get the end user involved at the front end, help them get involved, have them make recommendations for a type of device that they would want to use. Another anecdote I'll share with you. Recently I was talking to a customer that was looking at upgrading a device that had been end-of-life. It was an older tablet-based device, and there's many thousands of units here we're talking about. And the person I was talking to just assumed that, well, they were asking me for advice on what would be a sort of a next-gen tablet that they could use. And I started asking him questions. Well, have you defined the requirements for what the next-gen solution needs to be? And he obviously hadn't done that. And I had him go back and ask a few questions, and it turns out that not only he had not done the requirements, but the actual tablet form factor was something that the end user didn't really like using in the first place. It was too big, it was slow. They just didn't like the interface. So he's completely retooling how he's looking at this project, and again, he's going back to defining what that Gen 2 project should look like. So again, get your end users involved. They can be a great help for you. And then lastly, I mentioned this earlier, manage the change within the enterprise. A lot of times these mobile deployments can be a bit disruptive. They can get a lot of visibility too within the enterprise, making the company more productive, more efficient, more cost effective. And so, get people on your side. Get those folks that are managing your ERP environment, get them involved, help them understand their role and why the company is doing what you're doing, and I think you'll have a lot of success with that. So I covered a lot. We went through BYOD, we went through mission critical mobile stuff, some deployment stuff, and I think Woody, I think we're about on time. as far as questions go. So I think at this point, I'll throw it back to you, and we can field some questions, hopefully.
Sounds good. Yes, we do have a couple right here, and I do want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask it. Put it in the type it in the question section, and we will address it. One of the first ones we have: what software tools do you recommend for BYOD device management?
Well, I'm not going to necessarily recommend a specific product. It's easy for me to say, but because there are many out there, it just depends on what you need. AirWatch is a great tool. Sodi has a great tool. Motorola has some great tools. It just depends on what you need. Most of these tools, though, do provide capabilities for, as I mentioned earlier, ensuring device management, for wiping the data on the device, ensuring data security, locking a device down if you needed to, if it gets lost or stolen, limiting the types of applications that an end user might want to access on the device, whether it's Twitter or something, or somebody gets a hold of it and starts sending out tweets from an enterprise device, and that's not kind of the messaging you wanted to go out. So again, I'd encourage you to go out, just do a search under mobile device management. Lots of tools out there, cloud-based solutions, enterprise-based solutions. So look at those tools out there, and certainly if you have questions, any additional questions, I'd be happy to help you with that.
The next question: who should develop the requirements for specific mobile devices and projects?
Well, I guess that's kind of up to your business. Again, it kind of gets down to the stakeholders in the project. If you have a project management team, obviously those are some of the best people to use. It kind of gets down to sort of managing the project post-deployment. It can be a challenge if you say take somebody from PC or business and make them do this requirements work plus plus their other job, right? If you can negotiate it to where they work on your project part-time or as a dedicated resource to help define those requirements, more the better. But it requires, you do need somebody that has some project management, so some discipline and some rigor in defining what these are, because again, you're going to be interacting with a whole bunch of parts of your organization.
All right, the next question is: what security measures can be done with BYOD, and do you have any examples of security solutions and potential suppliers for those?
Well, again, I would steer you towards a device management tool. There are a whole bunch of different security methodologies that you can apply, whether it's certificate type based credentialing or security certificates. Obviously, the device management platforms have certain types of encryption algorithms already built into them, so you could push down authentication, security, triple des encryption type algorithms to keep the device from getting into the wrong hands or somebody logging into a system that they shouldn't be. So I'd be happy to talk offline more about that, depending on who, if you'd like to, whoever submitted the question. It's a fairly lengthy discussion, kind of outside the scope of the time we have left here, but yeah, do a little research. A lot of these device management tools will hopefully provide the bulk of what the security level you're after.
The person had a follow-up to that question. Do you think VPN access using smartphone is not enough for security?
It depends. I mean, I've seen just a VPN be enough, but again, it gets down to what your corporate security policy is. I've worked with customers where, you know, just a VPN wasn't going to be enough, so we had to. And this was working with AT&T, so we worked with the carrier to build, you know, a radio server environment for them, and it worked in the MPLS cloud. And I'm not a security expert certainly, but the guys we did get involved had a very complex security model that they use. So again, it just depends, and that was for that customer. So it just depends on you know, what your security needs are and what your corporate policies are.
Another question. We are looking at this is from the asker. We are looking at deploying iPads for use and have heard about possibly centrally managing the applications. Do you know of any way to do that?
Sure. Again, getting back to, you know, I mentioned AirWatch earlier, I mentioned SOTI earlier. Both of those tools will allow you to centrally manage an application so that you can version an application. You can oh gosh, there's any number of features you can do to centrally manage that app. So as you create one golden image, let's say a user resets his device, for example, and he's like, oh, I don't know what to do. I can't get to my app. You can use these tools to actually push out that golden image that would have you know, his security application, all of his device resident data that might be required. You know, any other rules and or policies that might be applied to the application can all be managed centrally from these tools, and they're very powerful. They allow you to look at you know, when the user last logged in, you know, what their battery state is, you know, any number of metrics that you can generate or maybe even think of can be developed from these tools. And but your point about central management, absolutely, most of these device management platforms can allow you to do just that.
A related question to that, Greg. How are SOTI and AirWatch licensed?
SOTI is licensed by device. You can do it like in packs of 10. AirWatch, you know, they have kind of modified their licensing model, but I believe it's on a per user basis. AirWatch is a cloud-based offering. And again, those are just two examples of many that are out there. There's Afaria. There's a whole bunch of different tools out there. It really depends on how the offering is sold and how it's deployed. Now, getting back to AirWatch, I think that's a pretty powerful tool, just because if you don't want to invest in servers in your space and you know, kind of manage all that from a hardware perspective, having a hosted environment like that is really very useful, because you can access it from anywhere and you can provide support from anywhere.
All right, a lot of great questions. I think we got through all of them. And it looks like we have. So I guess I will go ahead and say, Greg, thank you very much for the presentation. Again, thank you all very much for your participation in today's event. If you'd like more information on Bring Your Own Device or to schedule a one-on-one consultation, please contact RACO, and you can call us at 1-800-446-1991 or visit racoindustries.com. And of course, Greg is also available for more consultation and questions. So again, thank you all very much for attending. Have a great day.